Hey y'all, Michelle Raza here with Finding Yourself SATX Life Coaching, where since 2017 we've helped our clients achieve success by working with them to fill out their personal vision statement, establish their goals, and most importantly, meet with their coach often enough to be held accountable to these goals. Visit my website. It's at www.findingyourselfsatx.com. Thanks, y'all. Also, if you like these videos, if they provide value to you, please do like and subscribe. It really does help us little YouTubers. So this week, we're going to continue talking about Melody Beattie's Codependent No More. We've been on her chapter. She calls it Undependence, which I said I don't really like, but it's being independent, finding non-dependence, undependence, whatever you want to call it. Just no longer being attached to your chemically dependent person or other person that you care for. And basically, the definition of a codependent is where that person's problems have kind of overtaken your life to the point where you're not really caring for yourself and you don't really have a healthy balance in your own life. So last week, we talked through the beginning of this chapter, and then I said that I was going to cover a little more slowly her ideas of how to kind of achieve this independence. So it's great. She's telling us we need independence, but how do we get there? I think a lot of us, the first step in understanding a problem is identifying it, accepting that you have a problem. But a lot of us get stuck at that point, right? We've identified that there's something wrong, but now what do we do about it and how do we change it? The easiest example that I can give you is the example of weight. Most of us, especially if you're over 30, right, you start packing on the pounds, you struggle to lose it, and you can see what you're doing wrong, but you can't necessarily change it. And so I just do want to be cognizant that just because you've studied codependency and you understand now that maybe you're a codependent doesn't necessarily mean that you can change it and everything's good to go. It's a journey, and self-care, self-improvement, becoming your best self, finding yourself, right? That's the name of the company. It's a journey, it's a path. And once you're on it, most likely you'll continuously find things to tweak, things to improve. Also, whenever you take your finger off of it, you're going to slide back to whatever imbalance you had before you started your journey. We're all wired in specific ways, whether it be nature or nurture. Some of the things you're born with, and some of the things is just a byproduct of your childhood. So it's really important to just kind of take stock of where you are and keep on it because it does never end. It's a continuous lifelong journey. Just like you should strive for lifelong learning and improvement in your mental capacity, you should also strive for lifelong balance. Anyway, but let's talk about her first idea here from her chapter. So I'm on page 105. Hopefully you've picked up your own copy of the book. She says, 1. Finish business from our childhoods as best we can. Grieve. Get some perspective. Figure out how events from our childhoods are affecting what we're doing now. And I'll go ahead and read what she put in the book, but I will say that you can do some of this by journaling. If you have health insurance, I always recommend therapy. That really does help. And also be patient, right? So if you're talking to a therapist, you want to be seeing them consistently seeing them once a week for about 6 months before you're going to see any real changes in your way of thinking, your way of being, your perspective. It takes some time to unravel why you are, how you are, and ultimately to make some great changes in your life. A client who has been in committed love relationships with 2 alcoholics told me the following story. Her father left home when she was 5 years old. He had been drunk for most of those 5 years. Although they lived in the same city, she rarely saw her father after he moved out. He visited her a few times after her mother divorced him, but there was no substance to the relationship. As she grew up, she called her father from time to time to tell him about important events in her life: high school graduation, her marriage, the birth of her first child, her divorce, her remarriage, her second pregnancy. Each time she called, her father talked to her for 5 minutes, mentioned seeing her sometime, then hung up. She said she didn't feel particularly hurt or angry. She expected this from him. He had never been there for her. He never would be there for her. He didn't participate in their relationship. There was nothing, including love, coming back from him. But it was a fact of life. It did not particularly upset her. She truly thought she had resigned herself to and dealt with her father's alcoholism. This relationship went on this way for years. Her relationships with alcoholics went on for years. When she was in the midst of her most recent divorce, the phone rang one evening. It was her father. One second. It was the first time he had ever called her. Her heart nearly jumped out of her chest, she reported later. Her father asked how she and her family were, a question he usually avoided. Just as she was wondering if she could tell him about her divorce, something she wanted to do. She had always wanted to cry and be comforted by her father. He began whining about how he had been locked up in a psychiatric ward. He had no rights, it wasn't fair, and couldn't she do something to help him? She quickly wrapped up the conversation, hung up the phone, sat on the floor, and bawled. I remember sitting on the floor screaming, "You've never been there for me, never, and now I need you. I let myself need you just once, and you weren't there for me. Instead, you wanted me to take care of you." When I quit crying, I felt strangely peaceful, she said. I think it was the first time I ever let myself grieve or get angry at my father. Over the next few weeks, I began to understand, really understand. Of course he had never been there for me. He was an alcoholic. He had never been there for anyone, including himself. I also began to realize that underneath my sophisticated veneer, I felt unlovable. Very unlovable. Somewhere hidden inside me, I had maintained a fantasy that I had a loving father who was staying away from me, who was rejecting me because I wasn't good enough. There was something wrong with me. Now I knew the truth. It wasn't me that was unlovable. It wasn't me that was screwed up, although I know I have problems. It was he. It was him. Something happened to me after that, she said. I no longer need an alcoholic to love me. The truth has indeed set me free. I am not suggesting that all of this woman's problems were solved when she finished her grieving or by one moment of awareness. She may have more grieving to do. She still needs to deal with her codependent characteristics. But I think what happened helped her. So let's talk about what happened. Have you ever talked to someone who everything's okay and everything's okay and everything's okay until finally nothing is okay? And it takes something really, really small to just basically send them into a spiral. It's like you're holding strong and you're holding strong for so long that it's ultimately something very small that tips you over. And I feel like as a codependent, so what happened in this story, right? Her dad was never there for her. And so somehow in her subconscious mind, she was trying to prove to herself that an alcoholic could love her. And all of this stuff it's very deep, right? It's very deep in your psyche, and it's nothing she was doing on purpose. But there's a reason why she kept going back to alcoholics. And so you'll have people tell you, it starts with you, you need to love yourself. But that's very, very challenging. And so one visualization that a friend of mine told me about, and it seems to help a little bit. They say that you want to love your inner child, and I think she actually moves on to talk about that in the next section. But it's very difficult, right? Because you were a child, depending on how old you are, you were a child quite a while ago. But if you're a parent, or if you have nieces and nephews, if you can visualize that child that you have present in your life and that is a child in your life today. And so imagine them kind of on this journey with you. And so if that child was hungry, you would want to feed them the best foods. You wouldn't want to feed them junk or something that would make them feel bad an hour later, right? You would want to feed them good foods and make them happy, but also keep them healthy because you care about that child and their well-being. If you think about that child and the person that they would date, and if you would be okay with the person that they're dating and how that person treats them. So it's a little harder to extrapolate yourself and your own inner child, because I feel like that's kind of very vague and a little hard to actually visualize. So think about a kid in your life that you know and you care about, and imagine them in the same situation that you're in. Would you be okay with them having a partner who didn't help at all around the house or pay any bills, or who was always drunk, or who hurt them? Would you be okay with that? And really take some time to think about it. Think about them. And if you wouldn't be okay with that happening to them, then why are you okay with it happening to you? You need to protect yourself, and you need to make some changes in your life. So, not trying to lecture you, just saying I understand how difficult this stuff is. It's very easy to read about it and say, yay, I'm cured. But in reality, it takes quite a bit of work. So thank you for hanging out with me today. I will probably cover more than section 2 next time, just because I pretty much already covered section 2, so maybe 2 and 3. I hope you guys are doing well. It has warmed up here in San Antonio. It's funny, it goes from like feeling like summer then to back to feeling like spring. But normally we have a couple of beautiful weeks, and then after that it's like 105, right? We are in South Texas. But I hope you guys are doing well. Please do like and subscribe. And if you get a chance and you haven't yet, please do check out my website. It's at www.findingyourselfsatx.com. Take care, y'all. Have a great week.